rapidly growing,
non-native tree species,
consuming,
alien tree species,
adapting,
exotic species.
they conquer.
Forest fire,
niche markets for non-native,
invasive species,
strong bark beetle attack,
Risk,
alien or a non-native,
resistance, heat,
citizen science,
ecosystem services, recreational use, pests,
Jeopardizing local economies,
perception, public biodiversity, urban trees, resilience, future, climate change, global change.
and devastating entire ecosystems.
A retired school teacher in the middle of the country. He's recording parasites of ladybirds. That's what he's doing year on year. He is now the person with the most data on these parasites of ladybirds for the UK.
Citizen science is scientific research conducted in whole or in part by amateurs or non-professional scientists for astronomy, for butterfly research, for meteorology. There are all potentials for citizens to help with the science.
Citizen science, it's a very simple action. So when you are going for a walk or going hiking to make a photo of a species, scientists can look at this information collected by thousands and thousands of people.
How many non-native tree species can be found in the Alpine region? Is the number increasing? And who observes and counts the samples of one tree species? Who counts sightings of pest insects and signs of diseases in forests? Only foresters, scientists and experts?
And that's exactly why we need citizen science. So with citizen science, we invite everyone to join us to find out more about non-native tree species. Where are they planted? Where do they spread?
To understand the power of the tool of citizen science, we talked to 4 of the leading experts via Zoom and mobile phone. Scientists who already look back on successful projects that would not have been able to conduct without the help of the public.
Helen Roy from the UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology in Great Britain.
Martin de Groot from the Slovenian Forestry Institute.
Dmitry Shepashenko and Andrei Krasovsky from IASA, the International Institute for Applied System Analysis near Vienna in Austria.
Katharina, you soon are one of those experts on citizen science.
Not yet. But citizen science is about to lift our project to the next level with the help of the ENaturalist app. We will hear more about the citizens' contributions to science and the well-being of nature and forests and urban green space. My name is Katharina Lapin and I'm the head of the Institute for Forest Biodiversity and Nature Conservation at the Austrian Research Center for Forests. And I'm also leading the ALPTREES project since its beginning in 2019.
I think citizen science is just a really wonderful way to engage and empower people within the scientific process. I'm Professor Helen Roy from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology in the UK, and I'm also President of the Royal Entomological Society, and I'm really privileged to be one of the co-chairs for the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity Systems Thematic Assessment on Invasive Alien Species and Their Control. And I think for me, it stems back to my teenage years, where I would go on these natural history camps to be recording species within this particular nature reserve, and we would just be out there with a notebook and pens, and we would be making sketches. And what I really liked about it was the way in which we then reported all our findings at the end of that time while we were out camping. It was so enjoyable and so satisfying and rewarding for me to see the outputs from my teenage natural history being published in a local society magazine. Because part of my PhD was on ladybirds, I made contact with a professor at Cambridge University called Mike Maduris, who was running a UK ladybird survey. He was a really fantastic mentor. And in fact, he invited me along to the first radio interview I ever gave. And I remember being really nervous about it. But then I just remember just the utter joy of being out really early in the morning in this woodland and just talking about what we were seeing and knowing that it was going to be broadcast to many people, so I could share this excitement and this enthusiasm with so many people. So I think that was then the sort of first ways in which I began to get involved more deeply with citizen science engagement. And then actually the Harlequin ladybird arrived in the UK the first record was in 2004. And so by this stage, I was working quite closely with Mike Majuris, and we decided it would be a really good opportunity to set up an online survey for the Harlequin ladybird. And there weren't online surveys at that time, so it was a first. We were just so amazed at the interest in tracking this alien species from members of the public. And here we are now in 2020, and these surveys are still running really strong.
Governments are looking for invasive alien species when they are just arriving. Citizens can help by being extra eyes in the field and searching for new findings of species. My name is Maarten de Groot. I'm working at the Slovenian Forestry Institute as a forest entomologist on the Department of Forest Protection.
With a whole team of people from Slovenia, we had the project Lifeforms, which was regarding awareness raising, training and measures on invasive alien species in forests. The goal of the project was to contribute to the reduction of harmful impacts of invasive alien species by increasing awareness and setting up an effective early warning and rapid response framework.
Lifeforms is a project by the LIFE program of the European Union, coordinated by the Slovenian Forestry Institute and started in July 2016 and ended in October 2020.
We only focused really in forests in Slovenia. Slovenia is on the sunny sides of the Alps. It has 1.2 million hectares of forest, which is actually 58% of the whole land cover of Slovenia. So this makes it the most forested country in Europe. Focusing on a management of species, we have to focus on the dynamics of invasions to search for them in an as early stage as possible. And therefore, we need a lot of eyes in the field. So we cannot rely only on experts because there are only so many experts going into the field. And already from last experience from few decades, we can see that citizen scientists brought a lot of knowledge to the experts. In Europe, actually, only 2 legislations are dealing with invasive alien species. So the EU plant health legislation and the EU invasive alien species legislation. And these are legislations we have to take care, and both of them actually are also focusing on early warning and rapid response. So therefore, we prepared this project. And I will tell you what steps we used to make it a successful project. We started with preparing an alert list because you cannot go to take all invasive alien species into account. You have to focus. For citizen scientists, should be easily recognizable. Therefore, in the beginning of the project, we started with 61 plant species, 26 insect species, and 20 fungi species, and 1 Phytophthora species. We prepared an alert list. That's a list of species which are not yet in Slovenia or species which had a small population and could still be eradicated. Beside that, we made an observation list because if you're looking at the species which are actually, we hope we don't have in Slovenia, you don't have a lot of data or people won't have any motivation anymore because they cannot find anything. But also from our side, it's good to see that they looked for species, but they didn't find also additional deep species from the alert list. And a good result is also that we get an overview of other species occurring in Slovenia. So challenges for this part was there was not a publicly available list of alien species for Slovenian forests, so we had to do it all ourselves. And also the horizon scans for the species for the alert list we had to do. And one of the main questions was actually what species should be included for the citizen scientists. That were mainly species actually which were relatively easily to recognize. And the other species, this would be more focused for real experts who are going into the field. The second step was actually an awareness raising campaign and education of different people, especially also professionals. We had a lot of workshops which focused on nature conservation experts, but also on foresters, forest-related businesses, and also volunteers, of course. We prepared a system where they could put their data in, and this was also presented how that's working. And of course, several excursions. Then, of course, we also prepared a field guide with good description. Here we had also several challenges. There were certain stakeholders which were not attending or very, very difficult to persuade to collaborate. And a lot of effort was done in awareness raising and education. And I think this is the main point actually where the citizen science project will fail or will be very successful. In the amount of effort you actually put into awareness raising and education. We had different case studies in this project. One of the case studies was on species-specific action, and one was site-specific action. The species-specific action was on a fungus called Euthypella parasitica, which is causing canker of maple. We made a lot of awareness raising. We got, at the end, a lot of good information. And on basis of that information and locations, we went there and cut the trees. So with this project, this case study, we got a nice output that citizen science helped actually to mitigate species which are actually quite common here in Slovenia. However, challenges is that this species was actually very unknown and actually very difficult to recognize by the general public. So therefore, we had to put a lot of awareness raising and teaching, making workshops. The third step was preparing an information system. And this is a system maybe people from the ALPTREES project already know about ENaturalist. Now we prepared our own information system called Invasive. If you want to promote a new information system, you may have to make the name very short and to the point. It should be catchy. So Invasive in English, it sounds already like invasive, and we think that Invasive, that was a very nice name for our system. We had a web application and an application for the mobile telephone. I have to say it is a good investment if you want to start such a citizen science project, that you are preparing also a mobile application, because most of our data came through this mobile application. Wait a second, I will just go again for it. We see that there are 60,301 records via the mobile application come into Invasive, and via the web application 1,937 records. In total, we had 394 participants who actually put something into Invasive.
Within the UK, we use a platform that's called iRecord, and iRecord sits on top of what's called a community database. And this was a revolution, actually, because when we launched our survey in 2005, we were populating a standard Oracle database with records coming in. And so we would have to go and interrogate that Oracle database by logging into a system of a computer attached to a mainframe, if you like. We weren't using web technology in the way we are now using it. And this community database, which is called Indicia, allows many of us to interact within that same database at the same time. And it also has the potential to hold all of the photos and things that are uploaded to it. So that was a really big shift for us in terms of the technology. And the iRecord system that sits on top of that Indicia database is a system that we use for gathering most of our biodiversity data from the Biological Record Centre. But I think it's really important as well that we allow people to send in their data in other formats as well. So some people don't necessarily want to be using the online technology. I still get letters from some people, and that's fine. I can put their data into the databases on their behalf.
There seem to be a lot of citizen science related apps and platforms all over the world. Martin, do scientists have access to the often sensible data of different applications to add to their own project data? Is this information open to the public and also free to use in between scientific projects?
That depends. If the other databases are willing to share the information to us, we can, but otherwise we cannot. Thing is that some databases are with private organizations, are with private people, and you cannot access them. And it's also not accessible actually for the general public. That's different with our projects, where all the information the citizen scientists are actually giving are available for the general public. As a citizen scientist, what do you want to do with your data? Are you open access minded person that anyway your information should be available for everyone? Or should your information only be available for a certain organization? As far as I know from the Netherlands, there were actually two large databases, where one was more really open access, like ENaturalist. The other one was more closed. Nobody could look in the data that easily, while this data would go straight to the nature conservation organizations. In regard, let's say, for very rare species, this would be the case, for instance, because you don't want this very rare species to be available for other people, so they could go for it and maybe affect their habitat. So there are some ethical questions regarding citizen science. There were different communication channels we actually used. Newspapers, the television, but also via Facebook, other social media like Twitter.
I think there's lots of different ways to motivate citizens. For me, I think one of the aspects is just around the storytelling. I think that when people have an understanding and appreciation of some of the stories, perhaps particularly when they're taken surprised by a natural history story, then they begin to get captivated. And when as well they see their connection with nature, they begin to be more motivated and captivated. And also when they see that there are things that they can do to increase the diversity in their garden or to bring more and different wildlife to their local area, I think that's incredibly motivating. And I think that as well with some citizen science, that engaging specific groups of people, so for example, working with the angling community when recording species that are within the environments that they spend lots of time. And I know there's been some really fantastic work in the UK through some groups which come together under a partnership called the Riverflies Partnership. And they work very closely with anglers to engage specifically them in recording these aquatic insects. Motivation, it can be very tailored towards specific groups, to school children, to ramblers, to beekeepers, but it can also be really broad to sort of mass participation in terms of just sharing a really fascinating story and also calling people to get involved and be part of the solution.
The function was early warning and rapid response system that the citizen scientists were bringing in early colonization of invasive alien species. But it's also very nice to see now we have a species called the oak leesbak, which makes a lot of damage in our forests. But with the information of the citizen scientists, we could even see how it's spreading all over Slovenia.
There are many successful citizen science projects. I can mention Wikipedia, for example, like no one institution can collect such a knowledge, but with a small contribution of different people self-organizing, control the quality, it produces solid and very good results. I'm Dmitry Shipashenko, originally from Russia. I have a forestry background and my PhD in ecology, so I'm working for YAS already over 10 years. Dealing with forest modeling, forest remote sensing, and carbon accounting, climate change, all these topics related to the forest. We at YASA launched already since 10 years ago a platform GeoWiki.org, GeoWiki, where we collect spatial information where everyone interested can contribute. This is dealing with land use, land cover, poverty, extreme climate events, and then we of course involve it to the model, provide feedback to policymakers. We provide different incentives, small prizes, also involve people in scientific publications. When a small contribution of one person can show the big results, great results for the global, like improved map or highlight deforestation in the tropics, for example, and suggest the way how to solve these big issues. Actually, nobody has a good map of agricultural field and field size globally, and when we involve citizens, we can collect extremely huge amount of information, which not possible to do any other way. Like within 1 month we collected 100,000 location validated and checked with citizens and also with experts. Then we can also estimate the accuracy of work provided by citizens and also provide feedback to them. Another project we are now involved is global forest management layer. Again, there are some country statistics, sometimes controversial, and there is no solid information how forest and tree are managed globally. Whether we have like short rotation, plantation, very intensive managed, or where we have self-regeneration, to have such a consistent information collected relatively short period of time. Of course, we combine different sources of information like remote sensing, and with the help of many people at once, information about our crowdsourcing campaign dealing with hurricane event came to the radio news, and then in one day we have about 1,000 people participating in our campaign, and within a few days we collect such important information that could be provided to insurance company, to emergency where hurricane hurt the most, what is the consequences of this event.
We have decided to pick ENaturalist among a lot of different tools because it's just already a huge European community. So ENaturalist gives us already a quite easy start into a project with all the citizens in the Alpine space, because it kind of gives us a very nice interface and a way to interact with you guys out there. What I really like about ENaturalist is that really everyone can be part of this research project. Everybody who knows tree species very well, somebody who knows only one non-native tree species. I'm a little bit in love with the tree of heaven. I find this tree species extremely interesting from different point of view. So what I usually do on ENaturalist, I collect data on the tree of heaven. Also like random collection of tree occurrences in your garden, in your park, on the way to your school, on the way to your work, to your favorite restaurant, I don't know what. But it gives really a chance to collect data on the growth of the species, but also a bit more detailed data if it's planted or growing naturally.
Like it works in Wikipedia, for example, when one person can say something probably wrong, and then other people help them to clarify and make more clear. And same with ENaturalist, when several people classify species, give a name, and also make sure if it's planted or naturally regrows here or a natural habitat. So it's interesting when you are going for a walk or going hiking to make a photo of species when we are sure or not sure, and also see the name. And then scientists can look at this information collected by thousands and thousands of people and see the distribution of species, how it changed over time. And also involve policymakers to make a decision if we have to do something about this, save some species, provide some additional measures, or stop maybe invasive species to come to some places.
So ENaturalist is an app. It's super easy to download. I do support this platform very, very much because I really like the idea of participation, the idea of transparency. There you have a community-based citizen science opportunity to do so. When you record the growth of a species, for example, on the way to school, and you upload the picture, some other user will verify whether this species is really the species you saw, or if you don't identify it, somebody else might identify it for you.
For me, maybe it's not so interesting what citizen science provides in terms of data, but how to interpret this data. My name is Andrei Krasovsky. My background is mathematical modeling and optimization. I did my PhD in Russian Academy of Sciences. And currently I'm working on two models. One is global forestry model, GFM, and another one is wildfire climate impacts and adaptation model, FLAM. And those two models we are using in ALPTREES project. At EASA there are some projects where I'm involved. For example, there is a mega project Restore Plus, where citizen science is integrated with modeling, is integrating with stakeholders and policy leaders. So I think that's the most challenging and interesting part nowadays. What is the current situation and what are the drivers? So it's very important to not just have information, but to understand what is behind it, what is actually happening. And our modern models, modern methods, they allow for doing this. And I think it's really a great and exciting time that we can combine all these methods to analyze the huge amounts of big data.
Every morning we get an email from the information system that there are new records. So every day you have to check whether these records are correct. Unlike iNaturalist, you cannot, let's say, upload your information and it will be available to everyone. In our system, it's like this, that the information will be uploaded to the system and then their administrators are actually checking whether this information is correct or not. We are, besides a research institute, also we have the obligation to work against invasive alien species. So it's actually also in our interest to know more about the distribution of invasive alien species, whether they are found for the first time in Slovenia and where they are, so we can act to them as fast as possible so that they wouldn't disperse all over Slovenia. For certain species which we thought in the beginning, like American pokeweed, we thought like that it's not so common. But it turns out, after a heavy sampling all over Slovenia by citizen scientists, that actually it's very common everywhere and it's actually not so innocent. These are information that we can do something with it, and this is very helpful for policymakers.
One of the projects that I lead on non-native species is funded by our government department, DEFRA, the GB Non-Native Species Information Portal. We have an alert system within that where people can report sightings of concern that they might have of any non-native species. And most people are sending in sightings that they're concerned they might have seen an Asian hornet, the Vespa velutina. So that's a very busy alert system, and we get thousands and thousands of suspected sightings of Asian hornet coming through on that system. And every year in the UK we've only actually confirmed a couple of those to be Asian hornets, but because we have that system in place, it means there can be really rapid action and the Asian hornet nests are then destroyed. And so far we've been successful in eradicating the Asian hornet within the UK. And it completely relies on our inspiring public sending in their sightings.
Citizen science has become a very important and big tool in applied science today. As a researcher, we are not behind closed doors anymore. With citizen science, we can open these doors and really invite everybody to support researchers by data collection. And this information is so important for us. Without the collection of data through citizens, we will never be able to build up a database that big as we have it already, and we are really looking forward to have even more observations by citizens.
I think one of the things that citizen science allows us to do is to have that communication and to have that engagement, and for us all to begin to talk with one another about what are quite complex ecological processes and concepts. And so the whole concept of non-native species or alien species is quite complicated. And when we think about the invasive non-native species or the invasive alien species, which are the subset of those species that have been moved by humans that go on to have some kind of impact. Impact can be measured in the sense of an observable change within a system, but it also brings into play people's views and their perceptions as to the magnitude of that impact and the magnitude of that impact in their life. And so I think what citizen science allows us to do is to have those quite complex discussions so that we can begin to have an understanding as to what people think and what they feel, and allows us an opportunity to inform people, to give them the best scientific information we have at this particular time, and then for them to be able to be empowered to get involved in decision making. And I think that's just incredibly powerful, because we know in conservation that there are lots of different approaches that we could take. To be able to have those very rich discussions through getting people involved in science, I think is incredibly powerful. But of course, it does rely on a lot of enthusiasm and commitment.
We hope to influence a little bit the behavior and also the views citizens in the alpine space have on, for example, non-native tree species. Every action of a single citizen in the alpine space can help to shape the future of these regions.
I think we have a very long history of wildlife recording going back hundreds and hundreds of years in the UK. And so I think that really has put us into a unique position around the world in terms of the enthusiasm of people for wildlife and wildlife recording. So I think what's quite different here compared to many places, I think many places around the world are recording birds, and are recording maybe butterflies, maybe plants as well. But there probably aren't many places around the world where they have a scheme recording soil invertebrates such as little collembola, or some of the less charismatic, so to speak, species groups. So the diversity of what we're recording in the UK is really astounding. But I think many other places are catching up. And I think, there are like fantastic schemes and fantastic work going on in Austria with your projects, for instance, but other projects as well around things like roadkill projects that I've seen from Austria too. And then in, many places there are collaborative projects now, for example, across Europe. And I think that's really exciting, because I think when citizen science can work really well is when it works in partnership. And whether those partnerships are local communities working with one another, or whether they are countries across the whole of Europe working together, that's when citizen science gets really, really exciting.
We have the possibility to contact the citizen scientist and check whether this is really this species. So every citizen scientist which are checking in our system and want to submit a record, they have to be registered. This was also because as our information system was there for early warning, we needed actually to have extra information when the record was uploaded. I think they are happy. When you have a request, they ask for some additional photos or something like this. They are always very nicely replying. And I think that many people are again and again uploading records. This already shows that they're satisfied with the system.
I certainly know that in some cases that there can be these barriers to engagement. And I've heard, for instance, some people will say that they won't hold an event within a university campus because for some people the barrier of coming onto that campus is too great. And then, yes, I think for others, the idea of a scientist being perhaps also a barrier. But I think the more that we as scientists talk, share ideas, convey our uncertainty about some of the things that we don't know so well. We start to be all part of one big community. And then the barrier starts to go. When I go and give some natural history talks or talk to school children, them then seeing that the scientist is also human, that is a way to get rid of those barriers.
Lessons learned from this project is that actually the system we developed of an early warning and rapid response system in live Artemis actually worked. Many alert list species were reported, which is actually kind of course, a pity because you hope you will not find it. The problem is that many participants had only a few records, but already we were very happy that there are so many participants or citizen scientists actually went into the field and reported the species. Actually, after analysis, we found that people are only going to accessible areas and do not go that much into non-accessible areas. So this is a kind of constraint of citizen science. Of course, how do we know that alert list species are not there if there are no observations? For these white spots, actually, experts should check these areas. In Slovenia, we have a lot of tourists going into the mountain, and maybe we have to just find the good group which are going into the mountains so that they can have a look for this species.
I think that's what's really exciting as well, is it kind of takes its own life and people, without even really realizing it, start running their own projects in their own locality. And so we have this really wonderful recorder on the Isle of Man, and she really is just running a ladybird survey on the Isle of Man. And we chat and by email and through the online recording system. Then another person, and I could give you lots of examples of the ways in which these little studies have emerged as well, is a retired school teacher in the middle of the country, and he's recording parasites of ladybirds. That's what he's doing year on year. And he is now the person with the most data on these parasites of ladybirds for the UK. And so to see how we've gone from having a mass participation citizen science project launched in 2005 to then seeing all of these new activities that have kind of been created by the community is tremendously exciting.
You should kind of cherish these people who are very active, collaborate with them, because in the end of the project, certain people had accumulated so much knowledge also about this species that somehow the experts actually knew, like, okay, that citizen scientist knows their species. That's really, really good feeling.
It's not that I, as a scientist, am just conveying this information that other people are then receiving. I'm also receiving a lot of information and learning a huge amount from being part of this amazing community. That excitement of being together brings science to life.
Thank you very much, Helen, Martin, Dimitri, Andrei, and Petra, for participating in this wonderful podcast on citizen science. See you next time. Thank you.